We are working on how to create great PowerPoint visuals for our speeches. Refer to your text for using objects and handouts and any of those types of visuals, but we are working on our PowerPoint visuals. This video is covering how to use images, and when we're using material that is not our own, and we need to give credit where credit is due, and we're going to not plagiarize by creating credit lines for those images. So we're going to walk through that, and then we're going to discuss how to use text and graphs in your slides. There are different rules that we need to follow. For images, we love images in our PowerPoint. So that's what the audience wants to see. We find it interesting. Remember, this is just enhancing and clarifying what you're saying. So what will be helpful to your audience? The best resource is Google Images, right? So unless you have your own, you are welcome to use your own images, but otherwise go to Google Images. When you are in Google Images, underneath the image over here on the right, I have an arrow drawn towards it, you're going to find a website. That's where this image is located, and that's what, as a speaker, you are responsible for. And so we need to make sure that we write it down or cut and paste. You're going to use that on your slide, okay? So make sure you pay attention to that. The other thing you want to pay attention to is the size of the image. The size of the image, it depends on your computer and your browser. Sometimes you can just take your mouse and hover over the image. It'll show you the size. Down here at the bottom left corner, I have the size circled. I found sometimes you have to click on it to actually display the size, and we want the size to be at least 350 by 350. You can always take a large image and crop it and make it smaller, but you can't enlarge a small one. It will pixelate. And so when you're choosing your images, what is drawing your eye on that screen? Look for things that are of interest. I always encourage you to look at things that have contrast. One student used a lizard in a desert background. It was not, the colors were too similar. That principle of contrast in our other video made it really hard to see, and that wasn't the point of her. That wasn't the point of her in her speech where she was. So that really didn't show the lizard very well. So you want to look for things that do have contrast, what's easy for us to see, not things that are too much going on in an image. So what draws your attention? Make sure you take this website, okay, and check the size before you use it. In most classes, you would be responsible for creating a works cited page, and the image would be included on your works cited page because it is not your own material. And so I'm going to give you an exception to that for my class. As long as you have the credit line properly done on your slides, I am not requiring you to put that on your works cited page because you are giving credit where credit is due by incorporating the credit line. So you are excused for placing this on your works cited page in my class if you're using credit lines. You are graded on credit lines in my class, so we want to make sure that you understand these principles and are applying them. So the credit line is letting everyone know that this is not your image, and the website that this is located in. Okay, so because this is not your image, you need a credit line. Now, what if you do use your image? If you're using your own image, I would still create what we call a credit line here underneath your image and just say photo by and put your name in there. You want credit where credit is due. Now, a credit line is not something we verbally say in our speech. It's just this written acknowledgement that this image comes from this website. Not what found it. Google what found it. So it's never Google Images for your credit line. Okay, so credit line is the website where the image is located. I showed you on the previous slide where that is on the image. Okay, when you create a credit line, you actually are creating a text box under your image. Okay, and you then type the website into that text box. You always have the website .org, .com, .edu. You never have the slashes and all of that. You stop at right here. So it's not the long cut and paste. You would have to probably adapt that. There is no HTTP. This is not a hyperlink. So it's just the basic website that you found under the image when you were in Google Images. So here's the example. In this case, it comes from culture.org under this image. Right? So it's never Google Images. It's whatever you find under the image when you're in Google Images. Okay? Google Images would be incorrect. We always create the text box. We place it under the image, never on top. It always goes underneath. It's font size 10 to 12. And your alignment is really important in this case. I know it sounds a little nitpicky, but this is the appropriate way to create credit lines. If your image is on the right side of the slide, as in this example, right, this iceberg here is on the right, then I want my credit line to align with the right side of the image. We write justify it. Okay, if this image were on the left side of the slide, then I would align my credit line to the left side of the image, right? If this image was on the left, I would align it over to the side. If your image is in the middle of your slide or takes up the full screen, you can choose left or right, but it never goes into the middle. Okay, so those are our credit line rules, and make sure that you want to follow those. We love images, so use lots of images. Now let's check out writing. When we use writing on our slides, or those would be text visuals, we have lots of different rules to follow. I know, rules to follow. It's not fun, but they are important because they make a difference for the audience on whether we can actually see your visuals well or not. Remember, you're showing these from a distance for most of the time, and in the classroom we'd have a projector, but we still need to make sure that we are not overcomplicating. Everything should be simple. Keep it simple, sweetie, or stupid. KISS is a great acronym, and I find with you and your creativeness, you get overly creative and you forget some of these principles and the rules, and then it just doesn't go over as well. So we have several different rules, and I have them all listed here. And there are rule violations in this slide. But we do have a 6x6 rule, no more than 6 words per line, no more than 6 lines per slide. We want to see phrases rather than sentences, keywords. We should not have full sentences in our PowerPoints unless there's a very specific purpose, keywords and ideas. We want to use a simple typeface. It's easier to read and doesn't detract. Cursive or calligraphy, it's pretty, but it's hard for us to see and to read. You want to allow the same amount of space at the top as the bottom of your visual. So you want to center it vertically as well as left to right. Don't scrunch it all up. We want to use our space. We don't want a lot of blank or empty space. You can emphasize your visuals with your main points with color and large type. I also suggest you coordinate your slides with your outline to make it parallel. It helps you follow your own speech better and helps the audience follow you better. And we like you to use upper and lower case type. It actually is easier to read. So going over those rules, how many rule violations did you find in this particular slide? Let's see how we can these violations. Now, if we followed the design rules that were presented on the other slide, the previous slide, then it would look more like this. The 6x6 rule, no more than 6 words per line and 6 lines per slide. Phrases, not sentences. Simple typeface, some space at the top of visuals, using your white space. Color in large type or large font. Coordinate it with your outline when possible. And use upper and lower case type. Right? So this is much better. How many rule violations can you find on this slide? There's one. I violated the 6x6 rule. I actually have 7 lines on this slide. There are exceptions to these rules on occasion, especially when it's for educational purposes, like remote learning, for example. We just want to make sure that you're not cluttering your space. This is still easy to read. It still doesn't look terribly overwhelming. So I would make an exception in this case if you had 7 lines, but you want to be very careful of it. Your tendency is to put too many things on your slide. Keep it simple, sweetie, or stupid. Remember that acronym. Avoid using all caps. So when you take a look at using all capital letters, if you cover the bottom, can you read the top? If you cover the top, can you read the bottom? It's really interesting when you look at word recognition, it actually comes from the upper half of lowercase letters. Therefore, using all caps actually slows down reading time and it makes it very difficult for us to read. So use upper and lowercase letters, please. Now, some templates come with fonts already predetermined. It doesn't make it good for a presentation. So just because something exists doesn't mean that it's great. So you still need to be applying the principles and the rules that you're learning here. If you're using graphs, we have some tips. Group your data, limit the amount of data on the graph, eliminate grid lines and data points, make bars wider than the space between them, and always use a heading for your graph. I'm going to briefly walk you through some different examples. There are different types of graphs depending on the type of information that you are presenting. Pie graphs are great for distribution. Line graphs are better for showing trends over time, for example. So let's take a quick look at these examples. Here's a pie graph. We're grouping data together. This is too detailed. It's too many small categories. Here's a chart. And it eliminates some of the grid lines, so it makes it easier to see. The red, the purple, the green lines would be much more visible for the audience. So limit the amount of data and eliminate the grid lines. Here's an example of making the bars wider than the space between them. It makes it easier to see. It's a little bit more bold. Eliminate all the little data points, all these little triangles or dots along the way. If you're highlighting something particular, it would be okay to highlight, I think, one here to emphasize the year 2000, for example, but eliminate all the extras. You want to have a title for your graphs. It's really helpful. If you're just using an image, you may not need a title over your image, but when we're talking about graphs, sometimes we really prefer that. Here's an example. We have water skiing. Here is the starting position. And that way the audience knows what this really is. If they've never water skied, they may not know when you'd be doing this. So those are our tips for using text and graphs and how to incorporate images from especially Google Images. Remember, we love images. It really helps us visualize, enhance, and clarify what you're talking about.